Hello everyone, Dr. Chris Martinson here with an update on SARS-CoV-2 for September 10th, 2020. I'm calling this one a summary. We're going to just take a quick peek at some of the things that we've learned over the past, can you believe it now, 9 months. And I actually think that my COVID reporting is kind of wrapping up because I think we've got a good handle on all of this. Remember where we started? Remember with all this? I mean, for those of you who've been watching this channel for a long time, you'll remember this, of course. Remember this case, cluster, boom? Yeah, thanks, Ben Hunt, for that. This was the pattern early on when this thing was sweeping all around the world. We were watching these exponential explosions, and of course the deaths followed cases by just a few weeks, and we don't see that anymore for all sorts of good reasons. And I think we've got a pretty good handle on what the disease is itself, how SARS-CoV-2 spreads, all of that, as well as cheap and effective treatments that we can use for this. Not to minimize it, not to say I don't want this thing. I know that there are people who are long-haul sufferers. I understand that there could be lasting damage, heart damage, lung damage, neurological damage, all of that. And at the same time, this isn't quite as fearsome as it once was because of all the excellent treatments and the work by some really brave doctors out there who've cracked the code. So I think maybe it's starting to speak to a time to a shift in my reporting on this particular channel. Maybe SARS-CoV-2 is dialed down until we have exceptional things to come along that are really worthwhile and need to be reported. And I want to talk about the stuff that I actually care about, which is around resilience and regeneration, which is my larger work in the world before SARS-CoV-2 came along and kind of sidelined what I've been up to. So for those of you who don't know, that's what I really care about. I care about the world we're leaving behind. I care about the sustainability, the ultimate sustainability of everything, the human enterprise, as it were. And so, big story there, lots of stuff to talk about. I normally cover that over at Peak Prosperity. That's my main website. You can wander over there at peakprosperity.com and watch this thing in particular down here, the Crash Course. That's a nice long series of videos that you can watch. You could watch the short version, short for me, 53 minutes is the short version of the Crash Course called the Accelerated Crash Course. The rest of it is a bunch of chapters that collectively tell a story about how the economy, energy, and environment are on an unsustainable trajectory. And because they're on an unsustainable trajectory, they're going to change. So changes are coming. This is not doom and gloom. It's kind of, I call it optimistic realism. That's kind of my approach. I'm a very optimistic guy. You came to my house, you would have a lot of fun. I surround myself with beauty and projects and good things, and all of them are really tilted towards these two words, resilience and regeneration. So I'd like to, a Zig Ziglar quote I like here, integrity gives you real freedom because you have nothing to fear since you have nothing to hide. This is really how I live my life. I'm open book. I don't have a habit of hiding stuff, playing games. The reporting I've been giving you, I don't have an ulterior motive around all of this. I'm not trying to make a pharma stock go up or down. I don't have any financial interest in doing this. Google and YouTube demonetized this channel a long time ago because I was saying stuff that kind of ran against the powers that be. And that's a no-no to some of these social media companies who have a sort of an enforced position they would like you to take. That's fine. It's their business, private business. I get that. They get to say what they want to have on their platform. Hey, I got a website. I get to say what's on my website. So I get it. I just don't happen to agree with their type of censorship that they came forward with. And part of the reason is I don't do left-right. I understand a lot of the social media giants are about left-right, this big left-right divide here going this way. I don't do that. The axis I like to live on is this one here, which is about integrity versus ideological rigidity. That would be the opposite side of this down here. So integrity, the highest form of integrity I know, this is one definition of integrity. It's a way of understanding it. Another one I like is you have integrity when you stand ready to be re-educated at any moment in time. So let's rewind this a tiny bit and take a look at where we started. It was on January 24th that I put out this video. It was very early on. I only had so many hours of investigation into this new thing, this novel coronavirus. What did I get right? Well, way back on this 24th date, I got it right that it was a legit pandemic. I had sussed out from the available data that the R naught was much higher than 1.0. It was a scary number. I said as high as 2.4, I think, in this video, but obviously it was higher than that. I said the symptoms were very bad from symptomology that I was reading from accounts that I'd sussed out from people in China who'd had it, who described it as way worse than the flu. I got it right. I said the very old would be struck hard. Case fatality rate of 3%. That was right. That was as right as we knew at the time. Obviously, the case fatality rate was a lot higher than that in April and March, and now it's less than that out here in September. Why? Well, because we know a lot more about how treating it. I talked about the 9 to 14 day lag between infection and presentation to the medical establishment as being a real bad thing, because that meant that people were going to wander around infecting other people for a good long time. And I'd noted all the way back in January 24th that the WHO had already ticked off 4 of the phases of their pandemic checklist. That's where we were. Then the 5th was sustained human-to-human transmission in another zone outside of China. So we'd already gone through all 4 of those, and the WHO wouldn't call this a pandemic for well over a month and a half after this point in time. And I said on this date back here that this was going to be a really big deal. It was going to lead to travel bans, economic shutdowns, all of that. What did I get wrong way back on January 24th? Well, I assumed no herd immunity. I'd said that because this was novel, we hadn't seen it, there wasn't going to be any herd immunity. Hey, it looks like there kind of is or was some natural immunity afoot. We'll talk about that in just a second. I bought the cross-species jump story back then. You know, China was busy saying it was a bat, and then maybe a snake. Now I believe it was man-made, lab-made. I don't believe it jumped from a cross-species thing. And I also surmised in this early video that the very young would be similarly stricken, because that's a normal thing you expect with a novel virus, is that the very old and the very young are going to get hit. Got that part wrong. So what do you do when you get things wrong and new data comes along? Well, you change your point of view on these things. So let's talk about herd immunity. How did I change my point of view on herd immunity? By watching, reading, listening, assimilating a bunch of data, came up with the so-called XYZ hypothesis on herd immunity, which is that some percent of the population has that pre-existing immunity. We're learning more and more about this all the time. Some people get exposed but then don't develop antibodies, so they have some other mechanism, probably T-cell immunity, that gives them these so-called mild cases. And then some percent do develop B-cell antibodies, all of that. Throw in the social behavior changes, and it turns out this hypothesis talks about the fact that we might hit herd immunity much earlier than we had originally thought, or that I had originally thought. And this seems to be the case. This is what the data is showing us. How do we see it? In all those charts that look the same, this big spike and then the flattening out of the cases that we see in country after country, location after location, fits nicely with this theory. By the end of January of 2020, then, by the way, this was just January 24th when this first video came out. By the end of January, a week later, I'd introduced and explained R naught to everyone. I'd faulted the WHO for not declaring a pandemic. I'd said we ought to have travel bans. I called for an immediate travel ban. I said that makes the most sense. I faulted the CDC for being too cautious, not acting robustly to tackle the pandemic. They were being a little wishy-washy. And of course, they botched badly the whole thing around masks and PPE and all of that. We introduced and explained exponential growth and talked about that, and told listeners to prepare for a shutdown of normal life, to prepare to treat at home, and to prepare for a lockdown or some kind of economic lockdown. So I got that was just within the first week of reporting. And of course, along the way, we did talk about things like the adjustment reaction and how everybody has an adjustment reaction to a big, life-changing, worldview-changing thing like this. It's an emotional reaction. We all have it. Some are faster. Some are fast adjusters. Most of you listening are probably fast adjusters. And then there are people who are slow adjusters. Not to say they're bad people, worse people, better people over here on the fast side. None of that. You need this diversity in life. Some people are fast adjusters. Their job is to go out and do what you probably did, which is to prepare, assimilate this information, get ready, do all of that stuff. So we learned a lot along the way. And along the way, I also talked about how this was going to be a nightmare for the global economy. This is very early reporting again. This is all from February here. And as well, way back then, 7 months ago, we were talking about how men are more vulnerable and that seems to be borne out now. That we had some very early data back then. And we talked about how the WHO prioritized bucks over human life. That was where they said, well, back then, this was 7 months ago, the WHO is out there going, well, we understand a travel ban might make sense, but geez, that would cause a pretty big impact on global trade. As if they were the WTO, they got the H and the T confused. The World Trade Organization should be confused about that stuff, not confused, but concerned. WHO did all that stuff, and this is what got me in trouble with the authorities all along the way, was this kind of reporting, particularly this stuff down here. Yeah, I guess you weren't supposed to. Really, I think the way I see things in the United States, the correct view is to always default to the big institutions, the big corporations, the big government, and saying that they must be right because they're big or something. I don't know. That seems to be the default mechanism. Not how I'm wired. And to say, I don't think the WHO, I think they're staffed with very smart, very ambitious, very bright people. But I think what you have to understand, Warren Buffett's right-hand man, who's Charlie Munger, said, you show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome. So incentives really matter in this story, and I just think that there's some bad incentives in this system. So what did Warren Buffett himself say about integrity? He said, looking for people to hire, look for 3 qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if they don't have the first, the other 2 will kill you. Love that quote. I really think that's awesome. Integrity is what matters the most. Because if you have people who are full of intelligence and energy, well, they might just do things like, I don't know, prioritize bucks over human life, and it's not good. The other 2 will kill you around that. By February 2nd, what was going on? I was fighting the media big time. Remember all this stuff coming out? It's just the flu, bro. You had it everywhere. This is in USA Today, Market Watch, Los Angeles Times. This was everywhere. And I spent the pretty good chunk of the first 2 weeks of February just fighting this, pointing out all the ways that this novel coronavirus was way worse than the flu in terms of every dimension we could measure, especially the R0, but the case fatality rate, the serious complication rate, all kinds of things just didn't seem comparable. And they're not. They're really not. I would much rather have the flu than the novel coronavirus. And we learned the power of compounding and the role of exponential growth, and why exponential growth, when it comes upon you, it happens so quickly that it exceeds most people's adjustment reactions, but it certainly exceeds the ability of large, sclerotic, slow-moving organizations who are politically, hogtied to actually get out in front of a fast-moving story. So the coronavirus really just exposed that. It didn't say necessarily the CDC is an awful organization full of awful people, but it said that it was too big to respond well, fast, in a nimble way. Maybe next time they'll be better because they'll figure out how to skinny things down and put a lot of authority into a small group of people that can actually move quickly. Excuse me. But I'm raising this now because the power of compounding is really important, because we live in a world where you are surrounded by all sorts of exponential growth, not just the coronavirus and how it sweeps through case, cluster, boom, but we are seeing an exponential change on the number of species out there. Debt is compounding exponentially right now. We're seeing an exponential growth in pollutants that are entering the world out there. We're seeing exponential declines in soil fertility, things like that. It's just awful when you add up all the exponentials in some ways. And of course, some good exponentials too. We're learning exponentially quickly. We have the ability now with this internet to reach exponentially more people. Knowledge can grow exponentially. All that's fantastic. And we need to have our eye on the larger ball. It was March 19th where I presented chloroquine way back there. Here it is, September, and we still don't have a proper placebo-controlled, double-blind study that they swear they need as the gold standard, by Fauci and the NIAID and all sorts of doctors claiming we don't have the trial we need. Of course, they never ran that trial. They ran trials with toxic doses, giving it later than it could work, all kinds of stuff, right? Just awful. Truly a profound lack of integrity by some of the study designers out there, because they expensed human lives and suffering to make a point. And that lacks all integrity entirely, of course. And hey, by the way, I don't want to beat this horse. I know a lot of you, I've gotten this message a lot from people like, would you just stop talking about hydroxychloroquine? Well, I would if it turned out it didn't work. But hey, look at this. Here's a review that just came out in September 2020 edition here. And headline, hydroxychloroquine is effective and safe for the treatment of COVID-19 and may be universally effective when used early before hospitalization. A systematic review. What did they do here? They looked at a lot of papers, and they went through all sorts of papers. And what did they find here? Let's check this out. This is Chadwick Prodromos and Tobias Rumschlag here. They say HCQ has shown efficacy against COVID-19 in some but not all studies. We hypothesized that systematic review would show HCQ to be effective against COVID-19, more effective used earlier, not associated with worsening, and safe. So that's what they were expecting. And what did they do? Well, they searched PubMed, Cochrane, Embase, Google Scholar, Google for all reports on hydroxychloroquine as a treatment. This included preprints and preliminary reports on larger COVID-19 studies, and they examined the studies for efficacy, time of administration, and safety. So this is what I would have done if I had time to go through all these studies. What did they find? HCQ was found consistently effective against COVID-19 when used early in the outpatient setting. It was found overall effective. No credible study found worse outcomes with its use. No mortality or other serious safety issue was found. Conclusion, it works. All right, I just had to throw that in there because that just came out, and that's what a big review shows. So with all of this, as I was reviewing this, and we're coming through February, we're coming into March, and we did a lot of good work looking at all the different treatments that are available. And by the way, all I ever wanted was for us to find as quickly as possible safe, effective, if possible, cheap treatments that we could administer very, very quickly. So if I were in charge, remember we talked about, let me start here. The gold standard for the pandemic approach would have been, first thing, halt inbound infections. Just stop them, right? Face masks for everyone. We'll talk about why in just a second. Wash everything. You just wash. This is what you should do during flu season. It's standard. Microbiology / germ theory kind of control. Just wash stuff. You wash those little virus particles and bacteria, spores, and live bacteria off your skin. That's great. Real aggressive testing would be great. Make it easy, make it fast, make it cheap. By the way, we're failing on all of that still here in the United States here in September. Because I'm running I've got a project running up here in Western Massachusetts, and sometimes we have people who have to come in from out of state. And the difficulty they have depending on the state they're coming from and getting a COVID test. Not cheap, not easy, not fast, all that stuff, right? And then if somebody does become positive and all of that, you do rigorous contact tracing, pay for the tests and everything so that people don't feel inhibited from being contact traced. Pay for the treatments too. People go to the hospital, pay for them to go there, right? Pay for quarantine if they have to go into quarantine. And then you would quarantine all exposed contacts for 14 plus days. 14 seems to be sufficient at this point in time. Number 4, you treat everybody, and then you collect the data, and then you share it, right? And one of the things that you have to do when you're operating in a pandemic that runs exponentially is you have to be able to move rapidly and without perfect information, which means you have to have an ability to detect early signs. That's what I was doing in my reporting. I was reading preprints. Doctors were saying this worked, that didn't work. You just assemble that data and you find things emerge from the noise and signals pop out. And so some of those signals were things like how the effectiveness of masks and how well they might work for very logical reasons, because we know that, well, if you are in the business of expelling virus particles, whether you're symptomatic, pre-symptomatic, or asymptomatic, that if you have a mask on, fewer of those particles will go out into the environment. And out in the environment is where the second person would pick these things up. And if your face is exposed, then what can happen? Well, you would get a larger viral inoculum. That's the whole logic behind masks. You, the sick person, spew smaller numbers of viruses out into the world, and then you, the healthy person, would ingest fewer of those because the mask is doing a little filtration on the way out and a little filtration on the way in. Taken together, that means you're getting a lower viral load. That gives you a better disease outcome because you're starting from a lower viral count. That's it. That's the whole logic. It's not hard. Very easy. Super easy. Not hard. All right. And so if we were going to treat and collect the data and share it and all of this stuff, what would I have done? Well, just really lots of funding for the clinical trials. Make the FDA and the CDC useful. They should be massive data collectors for everything. And then you just test everything. You collect the data. You collect blood samples from every person who's hospitalized with COVID. You measure all the parameters. What's going on? With their hormone levels, their vitamin levels, their macronutrients, their micronutrients. What do we see, in every blood parameter we know how to measure? And there's a lot of them, right? And what emerges from that is that certain signals would start to pop out, like vitamin D levels, highly correlated with the disease severity in COVID. Ivermectin really seems to work. Hydroxychloroquine has a positive signal. Remdesivir, sort of. It's kind of a signal. Not really all that good. Plasma therapy, whatever. Just test it all. Find what works. Start using it. We'll get more sophisticated. We'll find out that some people with a certain genetic makeup or a certain pre-existing set of conditions and hormone levels and vitamin levels and things like that, they might need a slightly different tailored treatment than somebody else. Hey, that's what the sophistication happens over time as you tune these things, and doctors and the data come together to refine, and iterate through the treatments. And that's what I would have done if I were in charge. I would have had this in place by March at the latest, probably mid-February, because this all makes a lot of sense. All right. So integrity is another definition here, is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. And it's always hard to know what the right thing is all the time, but clearly the right thing would have been to follow this course of event, and it's very logical and easy to defend. So that would have been a good thing. And along the way, what did we learn? Well, we learned that we had a variety of things that could really help, not least of which was taking things like quercetin here, which is the same role, at least in part, that hydroxychloroquine plays, although hydroxychloroquine has a double role. One, ionophore. Quercetin also has that ionophore role, and the ionophore makes a pore for an ion, right? The ion in this case in question is zinc. So you want zinc to get inside the cell. That's role 1. Hydroxychloroquine, second role 2, which it changes the pH of the lysosomes inside the cells, and that pH is very critical for part of the virus replication cycle so that it can get released into the cell cytoplasm where it can then get replicated and create all its proteins and do its magic bad work. All right, so quercetin would have been great. Zinc, making sure everybody has appropriate zinc levels in their blood. By the way, this is going to all serve you really well during the upcoming flu season, because we're about to enter that starting here in the Northern Hemisphere again. Vitamin D3, boy, I've learned a lot about this along the way. I didn't realize how important this was. Now this is really crisp in my consciousness. I'm thankful for that. Actually, let me tell you this. I'm thankful for a lot of things that COVID has done. It's taught me a lot about virology. It's taught me a lot about how I'm going to avoid the flu. It's taught me a lot about how to tune my immune system up. Things I sort of knew, but now I really know them. And I'm glad to know that. Other things like making sure, if you happen to be light on selenium or all this and that, hey, one tip. If you have the ability, I go to somebody who's a functional medicine expert, and functional medicine is all about the data. If you go to a functional medicine expert, be prepared to lose a lot of your blood, right? They're going to just draw vial after vial. They're going to run all these tests on it. They're going to sit down with you with like a 20-page printout, and they're going to go over all your blood vitals, right? So you get the standard stuff, your RBCs, your white blood cell counts, your pH levels, blah, blah, blah. But they're going to go down, and they're going to look at things like how much selenium you got, how much magnesium, how much manganese, how much copper, on and on and on, and find your personal fingerprint of places where you're deficient or maybe oversupplied, and figure out how to bring that all back into balance again. So that's a great thing to do. And as well, vitamin C and N-acetylcysteine, both very good, very useful if you're in the throes of an illness. And then my personal favorite, to avoid getting the flu, organic elderberry syrup. Elderberry syrup is amazing. Get that tickle in the throat. You just take a little, boom. It doesn't prevent you from getting sick. Let me speak for myself. It doesn't prevent me from getting sick, but it makes the duration of the sickness about half, and it makes the peak of the symptoms about half. So half times a half is 25%. So it really knocks the whole experience down, and just makes it, you just get over and through the illness much, much more rapidly and with much less impact. That's fantastic. All right. And SARS-2, it's a real beast. And this here is the overall Bradykinin hypothesis in terms of showing what they found in terms of all the gene products that are either upregulated in red or downregulated in blue. And this whole thing is a very complicated chart, or it kind of explains why vitamin D, why zinc, why ivermectin plus, which is a zinc plus, in this case, a lot of the plus for ivermectin is doxycycline or hydroxychloroquine plus, why they work, right? Right here, vitamin D and the vitamin D receptor, it inhibits that from working, so getting more vitamin D and can really help. And as well, zinc can help knock out and down the misregulation of part of this pathway that's involved in turning bradykinin into the early precursor of bradykinin into bradykinin. So that can help stop that one right there. Ring, jumps in right there. So that's where the zinc comes in. And hydroxychloroquine as well for helping to block the viral replication in here. And then ivermectin, because my favorite part of the theory is that ivermectin prevents proteins, in this case viral proteins, from being imported into the nucleus of the cell where all of this gene upregulation and downregulation is actually happening. Somehow the virus gets in there. Somehow it knows what it's doing. Somehow it turns on this, turns off that, or turns this on a little brighter, dims that more accurately. Does all of that, and does that because it has to get into the nucleus. Does that somehow. So taking ivermectin can help block that process. And so that's why if you ask me today, do you like hydroxychloroquine? Yeah, I absolutely do. I think it works. I would use it as early as possible. I think ivermectin, again, just personal opinion, has a wider window of opportunity based on early data. I can't wait to see more data on this. I think it's totally incomplete. But again, pulling early signals, operating with incomplete information is best we can. To me, it looks like ivermectin has a wider window of working so that, because we've seen studies where even people who are hospitalized, even people who've already been put on ventilators, seem to improve with administration of ivermectin. And so my best guess is that hydroxychloroquine works really well at preventing things from happening when the virus is replicating. That's early in the cycle. You get exposed. The virus is really going through a peak of replication about 5 days on average. It's 5 to 7 days after exposure. And then your body's already fighting that replication cycle. But it's still in your cells, and it's still mucking things up, and it's still doing things in terms of upregulating, downregulating the genes. Ivermectin then is still playing a role there as well. So that's how I see it at present. Very complicated, but you know what? It just reminds me of something that Leonardo DaVinci said, which is that you need to learn how to see and realize that everything connects to everything else. I love that quote because obviously things are very complicated and connected to everything else, but also because the view I take of the world when I talk about the economy, energy, environment in the crash course, which is my main work in the world, that's a systems level view. And I can't talk to you about the economy and where it's going and what it might do and what it might not do without connecting it to energy. And I can't talk about the two of those without connecting them to ecology or the environment or the natural world and what it can do, what it can't do, and limits and all of that other stuff. So I like to see how everything sort of connects to everything else. I love the Renaissance view that Leonardo da Vinci brought along. I think to be a well-rounded person, you should play an instrument, you should write, you should work with your hands, you should be able to fix a car and split wood as well as cook and everything else in life. And be very, very well-rounded because guess what? Everything connects to everything else. There are no discrete subjects anymore that just stand alone on their own without any influence on anything else. So given all that, given that we think we've got a pretty good handle on this, the mechanism of action of COVID, the disease, given that we have a pretty good handle on how to stop SARS-CoV-2 from replicating and turning into a full-blown case of COVID, given all of that, well, now what? So what I really care about is how you can become more resilient, how all of us can work towards regeneration. So resilience, that's the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. It's the toughness you have. Resilience could be physical resilience, could be emotional resilience, financial resilience, things like that. So resilience, I think, is going to be a really key thing you're going to want to foster given the changes that are coming in the world, given where we are in this economic cycle, given where we are in this environmental cycle that we're in right now as a species. And as well, you can use your big brain for good or for ill. But one of the ways you can use it for good is to tilt it towards regeneration and really making your moves and your actions about regeneration. And so in biology, regeneration is the process of renewal. It's about restoration. It's the tissue growth that makes the genome, cells, organisms, ecosystems resilient to natural fluctuations or events that cause disturbance or damage. So it's possible to garden or farm in a way that depletes the soil. That would be not resilient, be not regenerative. Or you could get the same yields or even improved yields, but also be farming in a way that's regenerative. And so the soil is constantly improving, and every year it's better, measurably better, right? I care about all that because I do believe in my heart of hearts, again, I might be wrong, but I'm not confused. I do believe that there is a vast nightmare for the global economy coming up. Why? Because it's based on debt, because it's based on compounding debt, because it's based on exponentially more debt. Always more debt, more debt, more debt, more debt. There's a limit to that story. I think we're at the edge of the limit to that story. I actually think we're beyond the edge of that. We're like Wile E. Coyote over the cliff edge. Our feet are spinning furiously as a species. The Federal Reserve's doing everything it can to make the credit markets work, which is code speak for getting you to go further into debt if possible, or companies to go into debt, or governments, or whatever. It's almost like we're in service to a system of money and banking instead of the other way around. Money should just be this medium of exchange that's almost like it's a commodity that just exists to facilitate awesome things between people. But instead, we're in service to a system of money, enslaved to it almost, really. Entrapped by it, where the system of money seems to need to be able to grow exponentially constantly, which is cool if you live in an infinite universe and an infinite planet and there are no limits, but that isn't the world we live in. So at any rate, I do believe that COVID has also done something else, which is accelerate what we're about to see happen in the global economy. A lot of you can already feel that, so I know that many of you are already experiencing that. So where do we start? Well, education for me is the starting point. That's the crash course. It's all of this material I've been putting out here. It's stuff that Adam Taggart, my co-partner, has been putting out. We're an education organization at Peak Prosperity. That's what we do. We start there. We start with learning, right? So get as much context as you need in order to make some decisions. As soon as you can make some decisions, then you can act. Learn, decide, act. That's our model. By the way, only spend as much time learning as you need to get to a decision so that you can get to the actions, because this learning without action is just, it's not even interesting. It might even be detrimental. So, this is just a period of time we're coming up in. It's going to be, the next 20 years are going to be completely unlike the last 20 years. I think, again, could be wrong, but I'm not confused. I think this quote captured it well for me. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. And weak men create hard times. This is basically the fourth turning, circle of life sort of captured in a very pithy quote. And the question I have, given that I think hard times are coming now, is, are you ready? Are you ready for what's about to come? I know we can all feel it. It's in the air. Some of us are intellectually aware of what's happening. Some of us are intuitively aware. It doesn't matter how you got to your awareness, but if you're listening to this, you probably are among the tribe of people who already know innately, intuitively, one way or the other, that that big change is coming and that it might be a little bit disruptive. Between here and there, when things stabilize again, could be a bit turbulent. So to be resilient and to be regenerative are the two things that make a lot of sense to me in this environment. So given all that, all right, the conclusions and summaries for September 10th, 2020. Well, first thing I think we have to say is that we actually have a really good handle on how both SARS-2 creates COVID and how to treat COVID cheaply and effectively. Really good handle. Will it improve? Of course. Will I report on those improvements when they come along? Of course. But we have enough now to know what to do. What we need strong people who can bring this forward, because we've got a lot of weak people in leadership, a lot of people totally lacking in integrity, not interested in cheap and effective, don't care about the lives that get ruined along the way. They're running some other script in their head. They have other interests, other motivations, but integrity is not at the forefront of what they're up to. That much is clear. Common sense and logic and reason, all of that coupled to a lack of personal and professional conflicts, that explains how I was able to do what I did. It allowed me to be well ahead of the pack with my reporting because, you know what? I was willing to take a risk. I was willing to find early data, bring it to you, report on it, make my best guess, knowing that I was going to be wrong from time to time. All of that, hey, you know what? I can be wrong because I'm not trying to get, I'm not up for 10-year review by people who are going to frown on people who are wrong. I don't have a grant. I don't have money. I don't have a salary that's tied to any of this. So all I had to do was allow my integrity to guide me and study things as well as I could, bring it to you as best I could. So that's what I did, and I hope you found it helpful. A profound lack of integrity has been revealed in both individuals in power as well as in institutions. Don't know what to tell you about that, except this is where we are, and I do think it's going to get worse before it gets better. Hey, what a long, strange trip it's been, right? Certainly one of the most sustained outputs that I've put forward in my adult life was this period from January to now. And I am going to continue putting out the same level of effort, but I'm going to redirect it towards solution space. Like, what do we do? What do I do? What do you do? What are we going to do? How are we going to be in community? How are we going to build 8 different forms of capital to make ourselves resilient and operate in regenerative fashion so we can leave behind the kind of world that we'd like to be leaving behind? Not a wrecked one, but a prosperous one. So I'm going to be redirecting back to what I've been doing for the past 12 years now, which is that set of messages. Remember, it didn't have to be this way. It really didn't. If I was capable with a Comcast connection, sitting in western rural Massachusetts, of finding out all these things starting back in mid-January and reporting on them accurately all the way through, if I was able to do that, trust me, the NIH with a budget of $41 billion probably could have done it too. It didn't have to be this way. I have a solution set. I have a thing we could do. We could fix it. I know how to fix it. Very quickly, how would I fix that? I would give an equal budget to a new institution, and I would say your entire job in this institution is all you have to do is surface existing off-patent medications, supplements, things, the best practices for dealing with anything from heart disease to novel viruses that come along, all of that. And their whole job is to just find what works best, cheapest, most cost-effective, and that's their job. Oh, by the way, to work at that, we're going to pay twice the salaries at this place that you would earn at the NIH proper. But guess what? 10 years before, 10 years after you're in that position, you cannot work for a pharma company. That's it. Line the incentives up. And then guess what? When the pharma companies have a new compound, new drug, new treatment, new vaccine, they don't have to beat placebo. They have to beat whatever the B team over here, the red team, the supplement team, the off-patent team, they have to beat whatever they come up with. So guess what? It's not that, this new vaccine that they're trying to develop for COVID would be, work 50% of the time as they wave their hands in the air with wherever that number came from. They would have to beat what you and I would come up with. They'd have to be able to beat early, quick treatment with ivermectin plus zinc plus doxycycline plus people who are already on a rigorous treatment of vitamin D, so their levels are at or above 50 nanograms per mil. That's it. If you can beat that, then you might have a legit vaccine. Okay, that's how we could fix something like that. So thank you so much for listening up to here. I'm really proud to have been in service to y'all and to have shared what I know. I know I've made a difference. Thank you to everybody who's emailed me to let me know the difference that I've made, whether it was to your peace of mind for just getting good information that helped you understand what was going on, or getting your loved ones out of harm's way, or getting prepared early in order to be ready for the lockdowns that were coming. Thank you for letting me know that I made a difference. That helps me a lot. I love, that's why I do what I do, because I care. I really care about the outcome in this story. But now I have to tell you, it's time to focus on and deal with what's coming next. Is disruptive as COVID has been, I honestly think there are much bigger disruptions coming. It's going to be a heck of a ride, and your community is going to matter a lot. The tribe of people you surround yourself matters a lot. Hey, what do they say? You are the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. So make sure you're spending time with the right people. Who's your tribe? Hopefully they're curious, engaged, smart, passionate about what they do, and checked in, not checked out, all of that. For me, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tend to beauty, all beauty in my life, creating a beautiful, beautiful property here and pruning my trees with an eye towards beauty. And I'm tilting all my actions towards regeneration. And this is my beautiful fiance and my beautiful cow and my beautiful grass blades and trees and clouds. Not my clouds. None of it's actually mine. But this is what I've chosen to surround myself with at this point in my life. And I'm very happy to have done that. But I also think it's going to be a winning strategy given everything that's coming along. So if this has been helpful to you, if you're not really sure what I was just talking about, if it resonated for you, great. Join me for the future episodes. If it didn't, that's great too. Blessings on your journey. But if you're at all on the fence or you're wondering what's coming next, best advice I can give you is that the silence you can give yourself is just full of answers. Just give yourself some time. Think about what's going on. Feel in your heart what's going on. Ask yourself some really important questions about how you're lined up at this point, whether your job gives you meaning and purpose, whether you have concerns that are niggling at you that you haven't done anything about, but there are things you could do something about. Ask yourself how you are surrounding yourself with beauty and how your actions are adding to regeneration and regenerative activities, and if you feel resilient enough to face all the things that may be coming. And by the way, none of this is about putting on a hair shirt and hunkering down waiting for something to hit us on the head. This is about living our lives to the fullest, even though really exceptional changes might be coming along. Or maybe especially because. Yeah, I think I'll go with that. So that's all I have for today. Have a great weekend. We'll be back next time. It's probably going to be a pretty different message, and we'll start there. So thanks very much for all your attention all the way up to now. Thank you so much for being part of this whole trip, and thank you very much for all your attention, your feedback, your upvotes along the way to help other people find this, and it's been great. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate this journey with you. Until next time, Dr. Chris Martinson, signing off.
Hi folks, this is Adam Taggart, Chris's co-founder at Peak Prosperity. To get your own resilient shirt, simply go to peakprosperity.com/shirts. Each shirt is made of 100% organic cotton and produced in the USA. And when your shirt arrives, please send us a photo of you wearing it if you feel comfortable doing so. We'll add you to our wall of proud Peak Prosperity members who are showing the world that resilience is the way to a better future. Thanks for watching.